A desert planet with twin suns.
Why do I sense we've picked up another pathetic life form?
Use my knowledge. Much to learn. You still have.
Welcome back to Twin Sun Talks, folks. I'm your host, Jonah Liu. Thank you so much for listening, and welcome to this month's edition of The Ability to Speak Does Not Make You Intelligent.
The ability to speak does not make you intelligent.
On this month, we have a returning guest, Mr. Caleb Oliphant. Caleb, how are you?
I'm doing well, thank you.
Of course, of course. And then on for the first time, we have Mr. Luke Preston. Luke, how are you feeling?
I'm feeling great. Excited to be here.
Excited to have you. Okay, so Luke and Caleb are both very good friends of mine. We go to the same college. They're a few doors down in the same community as me. And I'm excited to have them on and talk about some Dune versus Star Wars. But before we get into that, Luke, since this is your first time on the podcast, I'm going to need a profile of you as a Star Wars fan. So what I'm going to need from you is your favorite movie, your favorite character, favorite TV show, and if you could have any lightsaber, what color would it be? So hit me with those.
Yeah, my favorite movie, I told this to Jonah earlier, kind of a traditionalist. Episode 4, I think you just got to go with the original.
Strong.
Kind of hard to beat.
Of course.
Then favorite show, I don't know how you could not choose this, but Clone Wars is just the best.
Agreed.
I think Jonah agrees with me on that one. I think Caleb may disagree. I don't know. And then character, again, I'm pretty basic, and also I don't know how I couldn't choose Luke Skywalker. Luke.
Of course.
Luke, I don't know. Kind of basic over here. But and then lightsaber color, again, I would go with green because green is an excellent color, and
it is
Luke. But so every Halloween, I dress up as Luke Skywalker. That's just like my.
And
costume.
It works so well, and I really respect that about you. And I mean, I think that's a great. I mean, that's just solid. Like it's nothing too fancy, but it's also just like there's nothing bad on there. So I really respect that. Caleb, what was your show again? Are you the Mandalorian or?
Yeah, I said the Mandalorian. I'm pretty sure. Yeah.
Respect. No, I mean, can't really go wrong with that either. But okay, awesome. Well, like I said before, we're going to be discussing Dune versus Star Wars. And for those of my listeners who aren't familiar with Dune, I'm about to explain it. So without further ado, let's dive into ARC Trooper training.
Gentlemen, who wants to be an ARC Trooper? I do, sir.
So I'm just going to go through, I didn't write anything down. I'm just going to go off the top of my head and just kind of give a brief synopsis of what Dune is. And if y'all feel like I missed anything, you can feel free to kind of fill in any gaps that I leave. But basically what Dune is, it's a science fiction novel by Frank Herbert, and I think it's really fantastic. I read it for the first time recently, this past spring, in preparation for watching it in theaters when it re-released for the Oscars. But essentially what it is it's sort of a space opera that has a lot of really cool political intrigue. It's set on this desert planet called Arrakis, and it follows a noble family called the Atreides as they sort of gain control of this planet and navigate any of the political espionage that is associated with that within the confines of the political theater of this universe. It's set like 10,000 years in the future or something like that, give or take a couple thousand. And it's very advanced society. And unlike Star Wars, it's set in the future rather than a long time ago. And essentially, there are these bad guys called the Harkonnens who betray House Atreides, and the main characters are essentially forced to assimilate with the native population of Arrakis called the Fremen. And these people are like they're almost like sort of like what you like Native Americans in American history, where they're very in tune with their environment. They know how to survive in it, and they have a lot of tricks of the trade that they teach to these nobles. And it's a pretty interesting storyline, and obviously it culminates in a very exciting finale in the in the book, which we haven't seen in the movie yet. But that's kind of like, I feel like, the major story beats without giving too much away. Do y'all feel like there's anything else worth mentioning before we get into it? I have a fly on my mic.
A couple comments that I'd probably make about Dune is it was written like back in, I believe, the 40s. Oh, I can double check that.
It was published in 65.
65.
Oh, 65. Yeah. It was one of the first like science fiction novels that really took off. Before Dune, science fiction was like a very niche genre that not many people were interested in.
Yeah.
And Dune was kind of the book that like made science fiction big. And so a lot of people consider it like the Lord of the Rings of sci-fi, a very defining work in the history of sci-fi. There's also 2 movies. I don't know if we're planning on talking about like the movies as well as the book, but there was a movie made in the 80s that's kind of really weird. I've seen it before. And then there's also the one that just came out this past year that was very good. But that's all.
Yeah, no, I'm open to talk about the movies. I was planning on talking about at least the one that came out this past year, but I'd love to hear your thoughts on the 80s one. I've heard that it's wild. I haven't ever actually watched it, but yeah, it's very defining. And obviously, as we're going to talk about, there are a lot of similarities between Dune and Star Wars, and a lot of inspiration that George Lucas drew from that and put into Star Wars, which is pretty cool. But Luke, do you have anything to add before we kind of move into this comparison session?
I think I'll just add some kind of basic stuff. Like in Dune, the main character's name is Paul. I know I'll be talking about him a lot. Besides that, I don't think there's anything I thought of that was super important. I just know Paul is important to know. He's kind of like the main kind of character throughout the book, and I'll be talking about him a lot. So,
no, most definitely, that's really important. And as we do these comparisons, I'll kind of explain the little terminologies that, as they arise. But I mean, I'm kind of going out of order, but I would say the most like congruent with the Dune storyline in the Star Wars universe is probably, in my opinion, the Book of Boba Fett. If y'all would, I don't know if y'all agree with that, but I mean, kind of the idea of the guy who was kind of outcast from society and taken in by the native population and kind of taught their ways, and it kind of changes his perspective as he re-enters society, that sort of thing. And also, obviously, the spice trade and all that stuff was pretty prevalent in that. So I think that's where I saw the most like sort of direct inspiration and sort of blatant story beats from that movie shown. What do y'all think about that?
I hadn't thought about that. That's actually very like, that is a good observation. I was like in my mind thinking about like episode 4, just because like I was thinking of the Empire, like the Harkonnens with like Sardaukar, which are a group of elite soldiers that kind of just like, I don't know, reminded me of like just like the Empire army, well trained and intimidating. So, but now that you're talking about it, definitely the bit with like being trained by the natives, changing the perspective. That's one of the biggest things about Dune and Paul's journey. And so I think that's a good comparison.
Yeah, totally.
Yeah, and I think the way that both in Dune and Star Wars, it's kind of like, they're kind of forced out into the desert, by, their circumstances, and they kind of, stand off with the natives, at first, in Book of Boba Fett, he's, taken captive by them at first and kind of treated awful, and then kind of like comes around, and the same kind of thing with them, like in the Dune, they kind of have to stand off first, have a little fight with them, and then kind of come around and kind of assimilate. And so, yeah, definitely a lot of inspiration from Star Wars or I guess Star Wars drew a lot of inspiration from Dune in that. But I think it worked. I mean, I really enjoyed the Book of Boba Fett. I mean, probably not as much as, some of the, Mandalorian. But
Book of Boba Fett's a whole other conversation. I mean, but yes, I agree that I think that it works really well within the context of Star Wars.
Mm-hmm.
But going into some more comparisons that are a little more specific. So the Bene Gesserits within the Dune mythos is this order of witches. I swear, there's this fly that keeps coming back. Got him. Nope. Shoot. Sorry. The fly keeps landing on my mic, so if I pause intermittently to try to kill it, that's what it is. The Bene Gesserits are these witches and sort of sorceresses within the Dune mythos, who have these renowned powers of observation and influence that is like very highly I don't know, sought after by the nobility within the Dune universe. And so they're, I would say, very much like the Jedi, because we see them sort of working alongside the governments of the Dune universe. Like there's like, they have the, I don't remember what the actual title is, but they like, there's one that's working for the Emperor, and is kind of his like truth sayer. And obviously Paul's mom is a Bene Gesserit and teaches him in the ways, but they have these powers where like it's almost like a Jedi mind trick where it's the voice, and they're able to influence people just kind of explicitly, just by speaking. But can y'all think of any other sort of interesting connections between the Jedi? Because obviously they're very different, but there are quite a bit of similarities as well. So is there anything that y'all think that I missed there?
I would say one that really comes to mind for me, and we'll, as we go through the episode, we'll see like there's a lot of things that are similar, but a lot of things that don't really match up perfectly. But I think one is how, in Star Wars, there's kind of this, like Jedi are supposed to have attachments. They're supposed to have, like, you're not supposed to be married, all that stuff, and Anakin kind of flirts with that, breaks that a little bit, well, a lot of it, and then in a similar manner, Paul's mom Jessica and Paul's dad, like in the book, they never marry because it's kind of like frowned upon for them to be together. So I think there's a definite similarity there. Throughout the book, it's kind of like a small hint of like regret that the dad has of never marrying Paul's mom. He's kind of always just like his mistress, because she's a witch, which is kind of like, it's weird because it's like a weird thing, but like they're super powerful. People also kind of treat them kind of like they're, I don't know, it's a weird thing, but I think that's a huge one. Just kind of that similar like the sort of they're not supposed to be. Yeah, there's tension between like the love aspects of it.
Yeah, no, most definitely. And I think that another interesting kind of layer to that, because there was definitely sort of that idea of like just kind of like the almost the status between the two, and there's a discrepancy there, but also like, and this is one thing that I think Dune has miles on in Star Wars as far as like the quality of it, but the politics around why they choose not to get married is essentially like so that Paul's dad, Duke Leto, can have leverage politically, and like essentially he's open to marrying someone else in the sense that he could like form alliances with other houses by like kind of playing on their hopes that he would essentially expand their influence by marrying into their family and stuff like that. So by not marrying Paul's mom and leaving her as a concubine, then he kind of leaves his options open in that way. So it's really interesting, but also, I mean, yeah, your point is completely right as well. And I think that I think it's fascinating, but Caleb, go for it.
Well, I was gonna say, looking more at them as a whole, like Bene Gesserit versus Jedi, I think one of the more stark differences is that the Bene Gesserit are like very blatantly like, we are here to steer history in our direction. Like we're here to do it how we want it. Whereas the Jedi are very much like, we're trying to keep the peace, keep the balance, like not, I think that's something that's really fascinating. Is like they're like very blatantly like, we're gonna do what we think is good. Even though they both kind of have the same like they're kind of outside forces kind of steering the politics.
Yeah, that is a really interesting distinction too that I kind of forgot about. Caleb, what were you gonna say?
I just had a couple of thoughts. I think one thing that I think is pretty interesting about like the Bene Gesserit and the Jedi is that like the mysticism that is associated with them kind of gets like interpreted as like religions in those respective universes. So you have like the members of the Empire in Episode 4 like telling Darth Vader, "We don't want any part of your like ancient mystical religion that is dead," because you know at the time of Episode 4 the Jedi had like no the ways of the Force were no longer well known among the people. And it kind of ties into the Bene Gesserit like have placed there's this they because of their influence they have like spread like rumors about Bene Gesserit influence and like made them sound like chosen ones. They've like created religions among the Fremen so that like whenever a Bene Gesserit comes to Arrakis, the Fremen in Arrakis will like accept that Bene Gesserit as like a chosen one according to the religion that the Bene Gesserit placed there. So that like Bene Gesserit can like use that fact for power. So that was just a thought that I had.
Yeah, most definitely. And have y'all read the book Plagueis? It's about Darth Plagueis and Sidious, and
I have not, but I've heard you talk about it.
It's first of all, it's a fantastic read, and y'all should get on that. But second of all, the Sith actually kind of do something similar, where it's kind of like a ritual rite of passage for them, as like they kind of like are trained. And I'm gonna butcher this because I haven't read this book in a while. But what they do is they essentially like Plagueis takes Sidious to this planet, which is super primitive and doesn't really have any contact. Like it doesn't have interplanetary travel or anything like that. And they arrive on this planet and they're received as like gods basically, and they just slaughter everybody. But these people like expect this. They understand that this is something that's going to happen. And they kind of like it's part of their culture almost, and it's been like ingrained in them that there are these beings that are kind of come down from the sky with like swords of fire, and they're going to just kill most of us, and we got to be ready for that. And so I think that obviously it's not quite the same as what you're saying, but just sort of that like having that status among these more primitive people, and not that the Fremen are overly primitive, they're pretty advanced, but like just having that status of almost like divine, like godly type, small g god, but like godly status among these people. I think that that's a pretty interesting observation. And speaking of the Fremen, this isn't this isn't the best comparison, but the best that I have is Fremen versus Tuscan Raiders. But the Tuscans I think that it works very well in the sense that like they're both the native people of this desert planet, but I think that the Fremen are far more formidable than the Tuscans as far as warriors. I think that the Book of Boba kind of helped give a little more context to them, but just all in all, I don't think that Tuscans would do super well against like I guess I kind of skipped over one, but the Sardaukar like are taken out pretty easily by the Fremen. And if we're saying like Sardaukar like Mandalorians, I don't think that the Tuscans would do super well in that scenario. But that being said, what do y'all think about the Fremen Tuscan comparison?
I definitely think that the Fremen are much more complex as like there's so much more lore surrounding the Fremen than there is surrounding the Tuscans. The only serious Tuscan lore we really have is from the Book of Boba Fett. But one thing that I think is really interesting is like how, now correct me if I'm wrong, but like Boba Fett wanted to like unify the Tuscan tribes from all over and like use that to like make the Tuscans a political power on Tatooine. And that's kind of the same thing that Paul does, because Paul in the latter half of Dune becomes like a huge religious leader among the Fremen. And so he like uses that power to like bring the Fremen together and become a major political power on Arrakis. And admittedly, I mean, Boba Fett does not succeed in his task, as we see in Book of Boba Fett, but Paul is more successful with that. But I think that's a pretty cool comparison.
Yeah. Which, on the note of the Book of Boba Fett thing, sorry, Luke, I'll let you. But like, I thought that was gonna end up being a really big part of the plot. Like near the end, he was gonna kind of unify all the Tuscans, and then they never paid that off at all. But anyways, Luke, what were you gonna say?
Yeah, I think an equally interesting comparison would be the Fremen with the rebels, and just kind of thinking
Okay.
about how, like, it seems like in both stories, kind of a huge part of Dune is that like the Harkonnens, kind of the bad guys, really underestimate the power of the Fremens. They're kind of like,
Yeah.
oh, there's just a few of them here and there, or like they don't stand a chance against us. And I feel like it's super similar in Star Wars with how they're like, oh, the Rebel Alliance is nothing, like
Mm-hmm.
they'll never stop us. And then obviously both of them, it's kind of like they come together, and I don't know how much spoilers I want to have here, but they come together and basically stop them from taking over the universe, taking over the planet, whatever. But I think that's a less obvious comparison in like just physical sense. But I think there's definitely a lot there with like what they do in the plots.
No, most definitely. And it also, like, the way you were describing it sounds a lot like Ewoks. So, do you want to compare Ewoks to the Fremen?
Yeah, I mean, I think this is a repeated theme. I think just throughout like society, not to be like super like meta, but like there's always like this like group that's like looked over and like it's like, oh, they don't stand a chance, and like the underdogs, everyone wants a good underdog story, but definitely similar to the Ewoks, especially episode 6 where they kind of come together and like out of nowhere you're like, whoa, how did they like bring down all the stormtroopers here? But very similar. They all use almost guerrilla tactics, kind of they fight their own way, but it works. And
yeah, most definitely. And talking about the Fremen a little more, just to give the context, they're actually the Fremen are my favorite part. Just the amount of detail that kind of goes into them is really, really interesting. And I'll talk about it a little. Well, actually, might as well talk about it now. This planet Arrakis, which is nicknamed Dune, so that's the namesake of the book, is really rich in this substance called spice. I think the technical term for it is melange, and it's this psychedelic drug that is just kind of perpetually ingrained in society on Arrakis. It's in the food. It's in just in the air. Like it's like these little sparkly particles that you can see blowing across the sands, and it's very much ingrained in Fremen culture as well. They have these like distinctive blue eyes that sort of mark their status as almost like secondary citizens according to the nobility within the planet. And also they have, so obviously Arrakis is this desert world. So they have this interesting system. What are they called? They're called still suits, right?
mm-hmm.
And they essentially recycle the body's water to sort of just give you like a steady stream of hydration, even in like a really intense desert environment, which I think is fascinating and just like a really, I mean, it's disgusting, but like also super, super practical and super cool. And also like their whole like the whole concept of like spilling the body's water, and like essentially they like when one of them dies, then they like break the body down, and it's like an honor to have your water join the collective water of the tribe. And they essentially like they use whatever water is in the body for drinking water when one of the Fremen dies. And so I just think that their culture, and I'm sure I'm missing a lot of stuff. Obviously they ride the worms, I don't remember what they call them. Yeah, Caleb's got one of them on his shirt. But I don't remember what they're called like by the Fremen in the book, but I just think that the level of detail that was put into their culture, and it all just like makes sense. Like I think that that's really fascinating, and I'd love to hear y'all talk about that as well.
There was a couple more things I wanted to mention about the spice. It's basically like spice runs the universe. Basically, spice is used by the what are they called, the space traveling guild, because all space travel on like the universe of Dune is like regulated by this monopoly of
Mhm.
these like mysterious people who use spice to like navigate, because like
Yeah.
spice allows you to like see things that like you
Mhm.
can't normally see, so like you can navigate the stars using spice. Additionally, spice like allows you to like live longer, which is a
Mhm.
lot of the reasons why the nobility seek after it. But that was a couple thoughts about just like the way that spice runs the universe in
Yeah.
Dune.
Yeah, and I know we've already kind of mentioned a little bit, but Dune is just so incredibly complex politically. Like the world he builds is just brilliant, and
Mhm.
part of the reason I love it. But that's one thing. Yeah, they really go into detail about the Fremen and just how they have these little they call them sieges, but like kind of like tribes, groups, and how they kind of all like it is like it's almost cultish. And it's like Jonah was saying, like they're very much like, they're all like family, but like they have all these like religious ceremonies, and like he's saying, when someone dies, they like it's an honor to like have your water given to the greater good of the tribe, and just very much yes, like they're, um, you know, they all use the spice, and it's kind of like I mean, it's viewed as a kind of a drug, but like
Mhm.
a necessary drug. I don't even know how to. But
Yeah.
yeah, part of what really I love about Dune is how much detail they put into all these different parts, and how much they really dive into the complexity of the film. And they're not just kind of like in Star Wars, kind of the Tuscans are kind of viewed as just like, oh, they're those people that are kind of weird, and like
Yeah.
there's some of that with the Fremen, but then it kind of jumps over to their perspective, and you really see like, oh man, these are like real
Mhm.
people and like families and tribes, and they're very powerful, obviously.
Yeah. And they're also like really efficient in like moving through the environment, and they're able to
Mm.
like completely circumvent these really trained military um individuals that are, and they just completely overwhelm them just with their knowledge of the environment, as well as their proficiency in like moving through it. And they have like a special walk that doesn't alert these giant sandworms to their locations.
Mhm.
Are they called like, what are they called, like earth
Um,
breakers, or
so
what?
I know that they call them the makers,
The makers, that's
the
what it is.
Fremen do, and then there's also like a technical term that's in their language. It's like I don't know. I think I'm gonna butcher the pronunciation, but it's like Shai Hulud. Um,
Yeah, yeah,
but yeah.
yeah. That's right.
And
Um,
actually, like I was doing research, and one of the funniest things I found was there's actually a super huge connection to SpongeBob. If y'all remember the episode with the huge worm and SpongeBob, like it literally looks exactly like the worms from Dune. If y'all know what I'm talking about, I don't know, but I thought it was hilarious.
I've never watched SpongeBob, but that's hilarious. That's amazing.
Yeah.
Um,
Well. Yeah.
I mean,
Yeah.
feel free to dive into that if
Well, I mean,
you want.
there's no really like super huge connection. It's just like there's an episode where a huge worm comes out of the ground, and it's just like it looks exactly like the worms in Dune. Like it's got all the teeth. It's like a super huge circle. I mean, it's just like
Mhm.
kilometers long.
That's
So it's
hilarious.
just kind of a random. I mean, SpongeBob is just random in general, but
It is.
it just I think goes to show how prolific Dune is in the. I guess SpongeBob is not really sci-fi, but entertainment
And
genre, we'll say.
yeah, yeah, good stuff. That's amazing. Um, okay, I kind of mentioned the Sardaukar before. Do we want to compare Sardaukar versus Mandalorians? I feel like that's another comparison that maybe falls flat. They may be closer to stormtroopers, but in the book, they're hyped up to be these like really elite warriors that are like unrivaled. So that description puts them more in like the Mandalorian camp, in my opinion. But
Mhm.
then when you see them actually like operating, especially against the likes of the Fremen, then you see that they're not super effective when they're not in a position where they can use their normal equipment, because they can't use their shields or something like that, because it
Because
puts like, because of the weapon, like the sound blast like it interrupt it, and then it creates like this giant explosion. I don't really remember what the
the thing
proper
that
terminology is.
happens, I believe there's the laser guns, which like shoot these
Yeah.
lasers, and if a laser gun comes in contact with a like energy shield, then it causes like an atomic bomb explosion, and
Yeah.
so
It
no
draws
one
them.
really like.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Well, that
Oh,
too.
what's the worms?
Oh yeah, yeah. That is true. Um, yeah, the frequency draws the
Here's
worms as well. Go
here's what
for it.
I would say. I think the best, like especially for Star Wars listeners, if you could imagine that the Stormtrooper army were all Mandalorians. Like the army of the Empire, but they were trained like Mandalorians, or they were Mandalorians. That's kind of what the Sardaukar are supposed to be, like this
Yeah.
really fierce, like high level, army. But they're like their army of the Emperor in Dune.
Yeah.
So if that was a thing, I think it
Thinking
would be
like,
that.
yeah,
Go
I
ahead,
think
Dylan.
that the main like difference worth mentioning, like the Mandalorians are very like independent, like contained within themselves, but the Sardaukar are basically just like puppets to be used by the Empire. Like they serve the Empire, they
Yeah.
serve like um people, but the Mandalorians like do not like to like serve other groups. They like to be independent, and so that kind of made me think that the Sardaukar are almost kind of like elite clones, which made me think of the Bad Batch kind of. But
Yeah. Like clone commandos almost, or like ARC troopers. Yeah.
yeah, ARC troopers would be a good comparison.
Yeah. I mean, it is pretty tough because I feel like a lot of like the really elite warriors in Star Wars are like actually really good at what they do. Whereas like I don't feel like we get to really see the Sardaukar really go all out. Like you hear that they're these like renowned warriors across the galaxy, and like Paul and his people are all like, oh my gosh, they're Sardaukar. But then these Fremen like just take them out like they're nothing, and that's kind of how they understand like, oh wow, there's something more to these people. But I feel like like once again, it's like the Mandalorians versus Tuscans matchup is like there would be no contest. Like the Mandalorians would destroy them. So
It kind of reminds me because like in the beginning of episode 4, Obi-Wan is like, only Imperial stormtroopers are this precise, we're talking
Yeah.
about like, so it's almost like the stormtroopers get hyped up, but we never really see them perform to the expectation that they're supposed to have.
Well, the precision argument, precision is not accuracy in a scientific sense. So they could be really precise and just miss consistently.
Very
Yeah.
precise,
And
very inaccurate.
yeah, exactly. So maybe it's the same deal here. I have a few more comparisons that we can run through pretty quickly because they're more just like, I think that the Krayt Dragon, and this is a shout out to my buddy John Cox. Need to get you on the podcast sometime, bud. But he pointed out that Krayt Dragons move very similarly through the environment as the worms in Dune do. There aren't too many comparisons aside from that. The worms are pretty interesting because like the Fremen like ride them and use them as a form of transportation. That's kind of like a rite of passage for them. But aside from that, I mean,
I
they're
think
both
one
pretty
thing
destructive. Go for
I'll
it.
say this is not like super, but just kind of similar to the worm is I think the Sarlacc pit, like there's
Mhm.
obviously the Sarlacc pit is different because it's not like moving around. It's kind of just a guy, a big monster in the middle of the desert.
Yeah.
But, it kind of has the same, like, it's going to swallow you and eat you. And like, it's this
Mhm.
huge monster.
Yeah. Kind of an unseen underground threat.
Yeah.
Yeah. That makes sense. Caleb, do you have any thoughts on that?
Yeah, I think the number one thing that sets sandworms apart is the fact that, like, I mean, sandworms create the spice. Like, the spice comes from the sandworms. The sandworms are, like, unique to Arrakis in that sense. And that makes them, like, a pivotal part of, like, the way that Dune runs.
Yeah.
I don't know if Krayt Dragons have a similar role on Tatooine. I mean, we see in Kenobi that, like, they're harvesting from a Krayt Dragon corpse, right?
Well, okay. Wikipedia says that I don't remember what they're actually called, but they're those big like creatures. Do you remember in the Malevolence arc of the Clone Wars, when they go through the nebula and there are these giant creatures
Like
that
whales
are
almost.
Yeah.
Flying
yeah,
whales.
they're like space. They're not the Purgles, but they're big
Mhm.
space whales with big wings. They look like
Yeah.
bats almost.
Yeah.
It's apparently one of those.
How did that end up on Tatooine?
I don't know. That's what I'm thinking too. I always assumed it was a Krayt Dragon until I read that somewhere. I think that it's safe to say Krayt Dragon, but I mean, we see a Krayt Dragon in the Mandalorian as well, and you see that its meat is very sought after. So, yeah, I don't know how crucial to the ecosystem Krayt Dragons are. I know that they're like an apex predator. Obviously, they're able to like eat sarlaccs and stuff like that, which I'm sure not many other creatures are able to do. So I'm sure that they serve that sort of role. But aside from that, I don't really know. I just thought it was an interesting comparison. Then we have Muad'Dib and the Kwisatz Haderach versus the Chosen Ones. So Muad'Dib, Luke mentioned it earlier, is sort of the religious status that Paul ascends to within the ranks of the Fremen. And then the Kwisatz Haderach is, I don't really know what the specifics behind it are, but it's essentially this legendary being within the Bene Gesserits, the witches that we talked about earlier, that is like a prophesized being with like immense power. Sorry, flies back. And I don't know. I don't know. There aren't. It's just like the main comparison that I would draw is that they're these like prophesized beings within these groups. But can y'all think of any other comparisons between them?
Yeah, I was thinking. I definitely think that the Krayt Dragons, or however you say it, man. I think that's whenever you read the book, you just kind of make up pronunciations.
Yeah.
I definitely think that it's a similar role to the Chosen One among the Jedi. Something interesting to note about the Bene Gesserit, which we didn't say earlier, is that all of them are female, and
Yes.
the Krayt Dragons, whatever,
Yeah.
the Chosen One among the Bene Gesserit, is like the only male Bene Gesserit, and it's like, which is actually kind of like the Gerudo and Legend of Zelda and Ganondorf, but that's totally something different. Because basically it's like this role, because like a lot of people like wanted to be the Chosen One and were like wondering, is this person the Chosen One? And people would like, members of the Bene Gesserit would like try to give birth to the Bene Gesserit Chosen One. And they wouldn't succeed. And that kind of reminds me that like people in the Jedi were like looking for the person who would be the Chosen One. And both of them were like said to like, have immense power greater than anything that anyone else had, which you see both through Anakin and through Paul, who is the Krayt Dragons, whatever it is.
Yeah, I'll just also add on. I think that you also see in both of them that they're the kind of these, very much like not historical, but kind of like legendary. Like through like, oh, there's gonna be a Chosen One. It's gonna be balanced to the Force. Oh, there's gonna be this Kwisatz Haderach, or however you say it. That's gonna kind of bring balance to the world, kind of the political system here. He's gonna be able to like see into the future and like know and do all this stuff. And I mean, that's just super similar, obviously. But I think also what's super similar in both stories is how, like, once they find Anakin, Qui-Gon Jinn is convinced. He's like, oh, yes, this is the Chosen One. And the Jedi Council is like, nope, it's not him, And the same kind of thing, Jessica, which is Paul's mom, is like, he is the Kwisatz Haderach, or how do you say it? And kind of the other parts of the Bene Gesserit are like, no, you're being foolish for trying to, say it's him. And in both cases, it turns out they're both the ones who, well, I guess it's kind of debatable in Star Wars, but. But yeah, no, there's lots of similarities in those two, and I think that they both do a really good job of like making it almost kind of a, very much bigger than itself thing. It's like, oh wow, this is like someone who's gonna like bring balance to the world, and it's like, wow, we need that in America.
Hey. Amen to that. An interesting thing. Sorry. This is really quick. I don't think it'll lead to much of anything else. But the Bene Gesserits, it's implied that they have like control over what gender baby they have.
I believe that's correct.
They don't really go into detail about why that is, but like whatever the mother, the great, I don't remember what her name is, like what the title is, but the great mother, whoever's in charge of Jessica, was like, you were supposed to give birth to a girl, but you chose to, because Leto wanted a son, you gave birth to a son, and that's like yada yada yada. She was not happy with that, so I just thought that was an interesting thing to add in as well.
Yeah,
but
the term that you were looking for was Reverend Mother.
Reverend Mother.
Mother. Yeah,
that makes more sense.
One more thing that I thought was interesting about both of these types of Chosen Ones is that both of them are like whether they really fully realize it, are like destined to like cause destruction. And like, because a huge theme that you see, because Dune is actually like a multi-part series.
Yeah.
One of the big themes in the first book is like Paul knows that his like role as a chosen one means that he's like destined to like go on this like crusade, causing like tons of destruction in the universe. And he's like, I want to avoid that happening to me. And it kind of reminded me of Anakin, especially in the Mortis arc, where like
Mm-hmm.
he's revealed in the Mortis arc that like he's destined to like become evil, and cause so much pain and death and destruction.
Yeah.
And so I just think it's interesting how these like roles of great power end up both being corrupted.
Yeah. No, that makes a lot of sense, and that's a great comparison.
And almost like how those corruption was like part of their journey, like becoming the chosen one and bringing balance to the force required him to turn to the dark side. And like
Mm-hmm.
Paul's role as the chosen one, as the Quirrell Todrak, is like to like go on this crusade. Like it's part of what it means to be that person. So
Yeah.
I just think it's interesting.
It's kind of the self-fulfilling prophecy at that point. But yeah, no, super interesting indeed. I have a few more. They're not. I mean, obviously, Arrakis and Tatooine are very similar, both desert worlds. There's spice in both. Like spice is a psychedelic drug, like the spice mines of Kessel and all that stuff. The Pikes are spice traders. And we got lightsabers versus crysknives. I think that that's an interesting one because obviously, like, if you were to put a lightsaber against a crysknife, it probably wouldn't be too much of a contest. But like, as far as their significance within the culture, like they're both very sacred weapons because obviously lightsaber is powered by kyber crystals. It's like a big rite of passage. Crysknives are the teeth of dead sandworms. And so they have very significant cultural implications within both the Fremen and the Jedi. And I don't know if there's much past that. Other than that, I mean, like, the idea of, like, rebelling against a galactic empire is pretty consistent. But aside from that, those are really the only ones that I have left. I figured I'd run through them and kind of bunch them together if y'all want to touch on any of them specifically. But, yeah, what are y'all's thoughts?
I mean, I think one that we can definitely come back to some of those, but just kind of continuing on with the chosen one thing is comparing, I think, Paul to Anakin, and just kind of the surrounding stuff. And it's interesting, like thinking about it, I see a lot of like, it seems like Paul actually compares a lot to both Anakin and Luke. That's kind of
I
like,
agree.
you know, it's kind of hard to, like I said, it's like a lot of things don't match perfectly, but it's fascinating how there's kind of always like, you know, this guy who's kind of young has to accept a lot of power and to kind of, you know, become a very important figure. And it's kind of, you know, like an older mentor who kind of helps him out. Then he dies, and now they have to like deal with it all. It's just kind of, you know, there's a lot. I mean, that's just, you know, classic, you know, hero's journey arc there. But I think there's a lot of similarities, but also differences. I think that's the thing that I also notice is that, at least I'll say this, between Luke and Paul, I think that Paul is a super, super realistic person, very realistic protagonist. He's very much, you know, not super optimistic and hopeful. And he's kind of just like, this is the way things have to be. And like, you know, I don't know. But Luke is very much like, oh, we're going to defeat the Empire and like, we're going to do all this and it's going to be great. I think that's something that's very fascinating. It seems like Dune has a lot more like of a realistic outlook on, oh man, like this is going to be really hard and painful. Whereas Star Wars kind of has the classic, like, it's good versus evil and good's going to win. It's going to be a great, you know, day. And I think that's interesting. I think that kind of goes back to, you know, Star Wars is like a, you know, entertainment film industry. Well, at least in, you know, the first movies. Whereas Dune, I think, was a lot more of a, you know, it's a book in the beginning and it has a lot more to say about like society and like the realism there. But
I see what you're saying. Yeah.
I do too. That's cool. Caleb, got anything else?
I was thinking a little bit about the Tatooine to Arrakis comparison, and the only thing that didn't really like sit with me was kind of just like Tatooine is kind of like nowhere. It's like no one cares about Tatooine, and like Arrakis is like the place. Like the Empire really wants like Arrakis to like, even though it sucks to live there and like it's an awful desert, like it's a very valuable planet because it's the source of like a material that is so important. It's like the material that allows people to star travel, to be able to live for a long time, and stuff like that. And so it reminded me a little bit of Jeddah from Rogue One, just because the Empire is like harvesting kyber crystals from Jeddah in the same way that that they're harvesting from Arrakis. The main difference there simply being that like while the people of Arrakis are able to like successfully rise up against the oppression and the harvesting of their resources, that isn't able to happen in Jeddah, even though people try to. So
have you seen the images of like, it was in a comic, I think, but Jeddah after the Death Star attacks it, because it didn't destroy the entire planet.
Yeah.
But it's like it created like it had a cataclysmic effect on the planet. Like the planet started breaking apart, and like it was pretty much uninhabitable after the Death Star attacked Jeddah City. Even though it was like a small fraction of the power, like it's still like it destroyed everything.
I'm Googling it right now, and yeah, that's pretty wild.
Yeah. No. But yeah, no, I completely agree. Yeah, the whole point of Tatooine is like, oh, it's a backwater world in the Outer Rim. No one really cares about it. The end. Like it's really just run by the crime lords and stuff like that. But yeah, no, I mean, just obviously the setting is very similar. Go for it, Luke.
Yeah, I think the last thing I totally forgot about this that I know I wanted to talk about was the kind of the bad guys in both. Obviously, we have the Empire. You mentioned Galactic Empire in Star Wars, and I think it's called the Galactic Paddish Empire or something. And like, it's very similar there, but more specifically, Baron Vladimir Harkonnen is kind of like the evil dude in Dune, and like him compared to Sidious, I think is so much good stuff there because like number one, they're both just disgusting. Like they both just have like, just like ominous, disgusting presences. And they're both pretty evil people. I mean, they both like, they're willing to do some evil stuff. And I think that's fascinating. I really miss that about a lot of movies nowadays. Like they're just like evil dudes that are trying to just, they'll kill and, commit genocide against millions just to like get what they want. And then kind of the same thing with this. This is a little less direct, but they both kind of have their like Darth Vader's kind of the apprentice of Sidious, and it's his nephew in Dune. His name is Baron. I forget his name. Baron Harkonnen. I don't know. He's kind of like his nephew though in Dune, and he's kind of like his apprentice almost. I think there's huge similarities there because they both, Darth Vader and him, both have these like massive presences and kind of instill a lot of fear and in their rule.
What is his name? It's played by or go for it, Caleb. Do you know?
Yeah, I'm probably gonna butcher the pronunciation, but it's like it's his nephew. It's Feyd, so it's like Fade.
Yeah, Fade Ralpha. Yeah.
His name is Dave Bautista.
Yeah. Dave
No.
I was gonna say
his name
Drax.
is Rabin Harkonnen. That's what they.
That might be the other nephew because there are two of them. I'm pretty sure.
Well, yeah, he has a son. That's the thing. It's part of. I love this. They don't have a.
Yeah.
They don't show it in the
Fade
movie.
is his son.
Yes, and that's the thing. Like he puts his nephew in power. This is a huge spoiler, but you've all read the book. He puts his nephew. I love this. He puts his nephew in power on Dune. So, and he tells him like to like rule with like an iron fist and like really be really oppressive, so that the people will hate him and like reject him as their leader. So he can like put his son in, and his son kind of comes in, and he's like a little bit less oppressive, and they love it because he's not how the usually other guy was. And I think that's just so evil, but also so like wow.
Yeah.
Like
no, it's fantastic, and yeah, that's right. I forgot about that. But yeah, no, I think that's a great distinction too between Sidious and yeah, just sort of that just repulsive evil, when compared to Baron. Sorry, I'm just thinking. Shout out Mitchell and Daniel. If you know, you know. But Caleb, did you have anything else you wanted to say?
No.
No.
I think
good. Luke, is that it, or you got anything else?
No, I think you could almost even compare the Baron to like Jabba the Hutt or something, because they're just both so
Yeah.
like. Well,
Oh
because
yeah.
I guess you also the Baron is like a huge, like he's very large,
Yeah.
fat
He's
man, and so like
gluttonous and
yes, I think, but
yeah. It's kind of a cross between like the evil of the Emperor and also the just si-
sliminess.
size of
Yeah, Jabba.
Jabba. That's really funny. Okay, we got some time. Let's do a couple Star Wars versus everything else's, and this is where the fun begins.
This is where the fun begins.
Alrighty, so if you're unfamiliar with Star Wars versus everything else, this is essentially a segment where I pit Star Wars characters versus characters from other franchises like Marvel, Lord of the Rings, Dune is on this list now. And basically, I made this spreadsheet that helps me just create random matchups. And so we're just going to roll through a couple of these and see how easy it is to sort of if they go too fast, then we'll do a few. If we get stuck on it, we'll do one or two. The first one that I have is Kylo Ren versus Ultron on the Forest Moon of Endor. So, Caleb, who do you think's you can take it first? Who do you think's gonna win?
Ultron is an absolute beast. In the what if, like, the only difference between Ultron, like, literally destroying multiple universes, and Ultron, like, is whether or not he gets the Vision's body.
Yeah,
So Ultron is just an absolute beast. Like, he is impossibly difficult to kill. It's such like a complex process being able to like isolate him from the rest of himself so that you can actually kill him. And like any single person, I really don't think is capable of doing that. So Ultron takes the cake easily, in my opinion.
fair enough. Luke, what are your thoughts?
Well, that's a convincing argument, but I don't know. Like Kylo Ren's pretty powerful, and I'm just thinking,
Come on.
the Force. I feel like I guess that Caleb has a very valid point in that Ultron has his electronic minions himself is everywhere, kind of in the system. But I think Kylo Ren could easily take down the body of Ultron. But that's the question: is could he take down the whole system? I don't know. But,
I mean, the argument. So the setting is the Forest Moon of Endor. So there aren't too many resources for Ultron to exploit as far as like.
See,
Oh,
but that's not
okay.
true. Because like the Force Moon of Endor is where the Empire built like the force field for. It's got like AT-ATs, ATSTs. Maybe the Death Star is right there, depending on like what time it is. So like Ultron can hack into and like use all of those things to his advantage. That's what
actually
I thought.
very, very fair point. I was gonna say Ultron is like a super advanced like vibranium coated droid that can think for itself very well. But that's actually a super compelling argument, so I might change my vote mid thing and say that Ultron would win. Yeah, that was a good argument, Caleb. Well done. Do y'all have any other thoughts, or do y'all want to move on? I got another one in the barrel.
I'm ready for the next one.
Yeah, let's do it.
we have Pre Vizsla versus Gollum on Geonosis. Y'all can make a decision on whether or not Gollum has the Ring of Power, but...
Well, I mean, Gollum doesn't have anything if he doesn't have the Ring of Power.
True. Very true. Let's just say for kicks and giggles he does then.
Mm-hmm.
So I'll just tell you right now, I haven't seen or read Lord of the Rings, so I don't know what exactly the Ring of Power entails.
You know what Gollum is, though.
I know who Gollum is. Yes.
Yeah. So Gollum's this creature that got corrupted by the ring, and really, correct me if I'm wrong, Caleb, because I know that you probably have a little more knowledge about this than I do. But to my knowledge, the Ring of Power really only makes you invisible, and it also kind of connects you to Sauron in a way. But
it does.
You don't really
also, like,
get the powers of Sauron. What was that?
No. It's mainly just giving you invisibility, and also like the more you wear it, like the more like twisted and detestable of a creature you become.
Yeah.
Like that's why Gollum is the way that he is.
Yeah.
But Gollum doesn't really have any like the way that the only way he's able to like really beat Frodo and Sam in anything is because all of them have been traveling for like weeks in months without any food or water, and like they're all at their absolute weakest. And I feel like Gollum isn't really that like strong, powerful character with many good skills because of that. I just think like his evil was more emotional, and I feel like in a pure fight, Gollum's strengths of like manipulation and emotional torment aren't really helpful because Pre Vizsla would just like use his Mandalorian skills to like destroy him.
I was gonna say he's up against the Mandalorian. It's not a very fair fight. Yeah, Luke, do you have any other thoughts? Because I mean, my Vizsla too.
Yeah, based on what I've heard, I think Pre Vizsla would take it pretty easily. I mean, invisibility would be tricky, but he can fly and like.
I was gonna say he's got. I'm sure he has some sort of heat tracking or something.
Oh yeah, you're totally right.
He's got to have something. I don't know if the ring prevents your heat signature for sure. I don't think it matters. I think that he could just. I think he wins. We got Cad Bane versus Hermione Granger in Theed, which is the capital city of Naboo.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's an interesting one. I mean, personally, I'm a huge Harry Potter fan, so I think I'm going to have to go with Hermione Granger. Just because, I mean, Cad Bane is so resourceful, but I mean, like, Hermione can literally use magic, and I feel like it would be pretty easy for her to, freeze him, bind him, take him down. But I think it'd be interesting. I think that's a really interesting matchup.
I agree.
The reasoning I'm having to use here is like I feel like Cad doesn't really have anything he can like counter, because like the only way you can like counter magic is using other magic, as far as I can tell in the Harry Potter universe. So like if someone casts a spell at you, you have to have a wand in your hand in order to do something about that spell and stop it from hitting you. And Cad Bane just doesn't have to. So, like, he could be very resourceful and like he could like hide and jump and move around, but I think that could only work for so long because Cad Bane is very talented, but I think he's up against something that he's not prepared for.
That's very fair. I don't know. I'm having a tough time with this one too, because the way that we like the killing curse of Avada Kedavra, which who knows if Hermione would actually use that in this scenario, but it's a projectile, so like you can block it with physical objects. Like if Cad Bane were to hide behind something, he would be able to evade it. I don't know. He has the little like leg boosters. I swear this fly. He has the little leg boosters, and I just don't know if it's like making noise on my mic or something. He has the little leg boosters, which kind of gives him like the Mandalorian advantage of sort of a jetpack type thing. I don't know. I don't know if he could shoot or like you see that he's like kind of a master duelist in Book of Boba, as far as like quick draws go. But I don't know. I would agree that probably just because we see Cad Bane's like formidable for killing Jedi, and like he is a very resourceful, as you said, Luke, individual. I think it would depend on. I mean, Theed also has a lot of places to hide, so like taking that into account, I think that Cad would probably be able to evade her long enough to kind of get the drop on her. I think that he's smart enough, and I mean, if he's able to kill Jedi, I think that he could kill a Hogwarts student, even if it's the likes of Hermione. But that's just me.
I was also thinking, like, I don't really know how you can use magic to like, like against blaster fire or like various other things. I don't know how magic works with respect to that, and so I don't know how well her ability to prevent that would be. But like knowing how adaptable and how like agile Cad Bane is, I think I'm comfortable giving it to him.
Yeah, very fair. Okay, if we're done with that one, I'm gonna say one more, and then we'll move into Rank of Master. But we have Shakti versus Captain America. So it's basically a Jedi versus Captain America. Shakti is the Togruta woman who is like in charge of training the clones and stuff like that. But she's also, well, it's kind of unclear how she dies. She's died like 5 different ways. But she looks like Ahsoka Tano for my listeners who aren't familiar with her, member of the Jedi Council, all that good stuff. But I swear, fly again. But
Where
I
are
don't
they?
know. I guess I would say the argument comes down to whether or not the shield can hold up against a lightsaber.
Mm.
That's actually, wasn't there like tweets about that? Well, like Luke Sky, like Mark Hamill and
Could have been Chris
Chris
Evans.
Chris Evans like had like a texting, like tweeted each other about that. Like it was something about
I
a
wouldn't be
6-year-old
surprised.
asking that question.
That's hilarious. Yeah, I think that's right, actually. I think I remember that. But I mean, like, okay, let's just break down, like, a lightsaber can't cut through Beskar. And I would say that they have very similar qualities.
I think
But
the
it-
vibranium would be able to prevent lightsabers because of Beskar being able
Yeah.
to prevent lightsabers.
I mean, I would assume that if you held a lightsaber to vibranium for a long enough time, I think it would melt it.
Yeah.
But that would be like, how long would it take to get it to that melting point, right?
Mm.
I don't think that any of the glancing blows. I still think that Shakti would probably win because I think anytime Cap throws the shield, she would be able to just catch it and then just be like, no, and then it's
Yeah, that's what I think. We're discounting like lightsaber versus shield. Obviously, but like the Force is just such a.
I was gonna say the game.
Yeah, Force is a game changer. So I mean, I feel like she could pretty easily. Yeah, take him down. I mean, I don't want to say easily. Captain America's great, but like it's just a Jedi versus anyone is tough.
Yeah, I think that Shakti wins. I mean, I think that Cap could probably put up a good fight and probably evade for a little bit, but I mean, I just think it's a matter of time in that scenario.
Yeah.
Okay. Any final thoughts on that, or do we want to get into the quiz?
I'm ready for the quiz.
I hope I'm ready.
I'm sure y'all both are. Okay. Well, without further ado, let's dive into the rank of Master.
You are on this council, but we do not grant you the rank of Master.
Alrighty, so we have two different ranks here. Actually, like, about as different as you can get. We have Luke, who's never taken a quiz, so he's a youngling, and he's going to try to get up to Padawan. And we have Caleb, who is a knight trying to get up to Master, which is very exciting. So essentially, if you haven't listened to the podcast before, you haven't heard the rank of... I swear, the rank of Master. Stupid fly. If you haven't heard the rank of Master before, what it is it's a 3-question quiz that I give to guests whenever they come on the podcast. And they get increasingly hard as you move along in the ranks. You have to pass a quiz to go up a rank. You start as a youngling, then go to Padawan, then Knight, then Master. Once you're a Master, you have the ability to challenge me for the rank of Grand Master. If you haven't listened to my 100th episode, you can kind of see how that might play out when my brother Jeb challenged me for the rank of Grandmaster. Obviously, I am still the Grandmaster, so didn't work out super well for him. But yeah. So Luke, you're gonna have a slightly different quiz than Caleb. Caleb, I'll explain how I kind of alter the Master quiz as it comes up. But Luke, since this is your first time, feel free to ask for context if you want it. I may or may not give it. If you don't know the answer to something, I would suggest kind of talking your way around the answer and kind of mentioning anything about Star Wars that you may know that could be related to it. It could give you partial credit. And much like the real Jedi Council, I will allow my personal biases and opinions of you as a person sway my decisions. So, are you ready?
I'm ready.
Okay. Question 1 of 3 is, who is the Queen and later Senator of Naboo?
The Queen and later Senator is Padme Amidala.
That is correct. You are 1 for 1 going into.
I didn't. That wasn't hard. It's just like, oh my goodness, wait a minute.
You hesitated for way too long.
I was
I
gonna
know,
say,
I was like-
Luke.
Yeah.
Luke, are you okay?
I'm good, but I was just like, wait, whoa.
I'm glad you took your time. Okay. What is the cataclysmic threat that Starkiller Base poses to the galaxy in The Force Awakens?
The cataclysmic threat. Well,
Just not overthinking this, because this is the easiest quiz that you will get.
okay. I mean, it's very similar to the Death Star in that it could destroy your planet.
Yes.
Okay, yeah.
Yeah. No, it is able to destroy planets. And
Yeah,
also,
is it like
interestingly
Star
enough,
Killer? No, yeah. Star Killer
yeah,
base? Okay.
yeah, that's what I said. The
Oh,
cataclysmic
okay, yeah.
Star Killer base. But it actually, like, I kind of forgot about this until I wrote this question. Like, it drains suns to power itself and like get enough power to like shoot the laser. So that's technically another threat that it has to the galaxy, is that it could decimate your sun.
Environmental, yes.
Yeah. Sorry, the fly has been very persistent in the latter half of this episode. It's just all over me. Okay, and you're 2 for 2 going into question number 3, which is, according to Princess Leia, who is her only hope?
Obi-Wan Kenobi, obviously.
Correct. Good job. Okay, you went 3 for 3, and I think that's pretty decisive. You have earned the rank of Padawan, so congratulations. How do you feel?
Good. I'm ready for my braid.
Okay, good stuff. Yes, sir. Yes, sir. That should be a thing. I should get some braids and just pass them out whenever. Just ship them off. That's hilarious. Okay, well, congratulations, Luke. It's time for Caleb's quiz. So Caleb is going up to the rank of master. You've had the most unique journey out of everyone, because I think that you've only had one quiz on air, because Caleb's been in one other episode. He was in my Rebels roadmap, which is really awesome. You should go back and listen to that after you're done with this episode. But we had some technical difficulties the first time we recorded it, where my audio was just awful. And so he had already taken his Youngling quiz, and he aced it. And so I allowed him to stay at Padawan and go up tonight in that last episode that we had. So he's had a very unique journey, but we're glad to have him. And for the rank of master, I have an ongoing list of questions that I just have numbered. And to prevent my biases from affecting the questions, I just put those numbers into a randomized generator, and I spin the wheel 3 times, and then whatever those numbers are, that's what you get. So they are the hardest questions, and they kind of they range in their difficulty. So you kind of get what you get, and we'll see how you do. So, Caleb, are you ready? Go for it.
I was going to ask. I was like, I thought Caleb's only been on once, but that makes sense. I'm glad you explained that.
Yeah. No, it was kind of a thank you for being patient with me and literally having the same conversation 2 different times.
It was a good conversation,
It was a great conversation. It was fantastic. But yeah, no, I felt like that was the least I could do in that situation. But yeah, Caleb, are you ready?
I am ready.
Okay, on your journey to Jedi Master, question number 1 is, what is the traditional weapon of the Tuscan Raiders?
That's the thing we see in the book of Boba Fett. It's like long and has the pointy thing at the end. I will not be able to tell you what it's called, I'm afraid, unless... And I believe the tradition behind it is like they get that worm that Boba Fett has, and it like causes them to go into the desert and find this material.
Yeah.
So I can like give all the context, but I don't think I could get the name for it.
That's fair. It's a type of, obviously a type of stick. It has stick in the name, and it starts with a G. If that helps jog your memory at all. This is a pretty tough one because it's not really mentioned. It's pretty ambiguous.
No,
so if you don't know it, then
I'm not gonna get it.
That was good context. So I'll give you some partial credit there. But it's called a gaffy stick or a Gaddafi.
Wow.
Yeah. So either one of those. So 0 for 1, but you did give some good context. So I'll definitely take that into consideration. Question number 2 is, what is the name of the freedom fighter who fought alongside Mace Windu and Anakin Dai in the Clone Wars? Twi'lek freedom fighter.
It's not. It's not anyone. Is it someone related to Hera? Is it one of those characters?
It is Hera's father.
What's his name? I should know this. Oh my goodness.
He's also in the Bad Batch. and
Yeah. Syndulla, Cham Syndulla.
Cham Syndulla is correct. Yes. So you are,
Yes.
that was really impressive. I don't know how. Yeah, that was good. That was very good.
It was
Yeah,
in there.
Cham
It was in there.
Syndulla is the orange-skinned Twi'lek, who is very influential on Ryloth, and yes, is the father of Hera Syndulla, who's one of the main characters in Rebels. So you're 1 for 2, going into question number 3, which is, what is Captain Rex's identification number? This one's hard. This one's very hard.
I'm trying to think the Umbara arc. He definitely
Yeah,
said
that's the best shot you got is, yeah. And so, yeah, for context, yeah, clones all have numbers aside from their personal names that they either give themselves or are given by their brothers or Jedi generals.
I want to say that it has 2s in it and has 7s in it. It's like I'm just gonna. I'm gonna go just CT7227.
That is pretty correct. Or not pretty correct. It's pretty close. It's actually CT7567. And so I think you might have been getting it confused with FN2187 because that one's got the 2 in there, and that's Finn's number. So
that's probably where it's from.
Very close, but not quite. You went 1 for 3 with some pretty close answers. I gotta say, as the Jedi Council, I don't think that you're quite ready for the rank of Master yet. But
I'm okay.
But I think that you've shown a lot of promise, and I think that you're very close. I think you're close.
I'll come back on.
You can maybe have a seat on the council, but not be a master.
Yeah. I think I must have to tell you to take a seat.
Take a seat.
You're on this council. We do not grant you the rank of master. That was a really good showing, though. I think that, yeah, all the knowledge about the gaffy stick was really good, and obviously, I'm impressed that you got the Cham after as long as you did. I mean, that was good.
In there. I knew it was in there.
I respect that, man. And then, yeah, the identification number is just tricky if you don't. Yeah, it's just tricky because it's not really mentioned other than Umbara.
Yeah.
But it was a good showing, all the same. Luke, congratulations on Padawan, and yeah, Caleb, we'll definitely have you back on, and you'll get another crack at it. But
yes.
That being said, that's about all that we have for Rank of Master. Let's dive into a little bit more. I didn't say it correctly. I normally say this wouldn't be a proper episode if I didn't leave you with just a little bit more, and that kind of threw me off my rocker. But anyways, what I have for you today is that Arrakis worms can grow up to 2,460 feet in length, and what we compared them to earlier were Krayt Dragons, and they only grow up to around 147 feet. So Arrakis worms are quite a bit bigger, and just based on that scale, I would assume that like Krayt Dragons are only the size of like a juvenile Arrakis worm at that point. So just kind of some interesting numbers. But that's about all that I have. Luke, Caleb, any final thoughts?
Go Twin Sun Talks. Listen to Twin Sun Talks wherever you find your podcasts. And follow them on Instagram.
Appreciate that. Thank you very much.
Yeah. I'll just also say, yeah, read the book of Dune and watch the movie. The 2021, we didn't actually talk about that, but the 2021, I haven't seen the old one, but the 2021 one is probably one of my favorite movies. It's just beautiful cinematically and just a pretty amazing adaptation of the book. So read the book, watch the movie, and also Star Wars is good too.
Most definitely. And yeah, we didn't end up talking about the 80s version, but maybe another time. Maybe we can all watch it and then come back and talk about it a little bit more. But yeah, love to hear it and appreciate y'all both coming on. And yeah, like Caleb said, follow us on Instagram at Twin Sun Talks. Subscribe to us on YouTube, Twin Sun Talks Podcast, and follow and listen wherever you get your podcast by searching Twin Sun Talks. That's about all that I have. Thank you for listening to this ability to speak, and you've taken your first steps into a larger world. May the Force be with you, and I will see y'all in the next episode. Bye, friends.